يقولون إنه نشر دينه بالسيف، ويتهمونه في أقدس صفاته، بل ويزعمون أنه لم يضف للبشرية شيئا. في هذا الفيديو سنواجه وجها لوجه واحدة من أشهر الأصوات التي تهاجم الإسلام على تيك توك، أنيتا. لكن المفاجأة ليست في اتهاماتها، بل في الحقائق الصادمة التي أخفتها عن متابعيها والردود المفحمة من قلب كتابها هي.
He was a PDF file marrying Aisha when she was just 6 years old and consummating the marriage when she was 9. Muhammad added nothing of value to humanity. In fact, he made things worse. Muhammad was not just a spiritual leader. Muhammad was a political figure who led military campaigns and authorized violent conquests. That is how Islam spread throughout Arabia.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be refuting a Christian apologist who you probably have seen on TikTok. Her name is Anita Speaks for Christ. Although she says she speaks for Christ, and although she seems to be a Christian apologist, for some reason she only ever talks about Islam. Her best performing videos are her just talking about Islam. Now when I say talking about, I mean of course lying about Islam, lying about our religion and trying to make us, our religion and our prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, look bad. So I'm going to be refuting her claims outright today in this video, and if you enjoy these videos, then like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you guys think, share the video with a friend, and let's get into it.
When you look at historical sources, Muhammad was not just a spiritual leader. Muhammad was a political figure who led military campaigns and authorized violent conquests. That is how Islam spread throughout Arabia. A lot of the Arab nations were Christian before they were Muslim. Nations like Egypt, Yemen, Syria, Iraq. Muhammad happily sanctions unaliving people or conquering them or forcing them to submit as second-class citizens.
So first and foremost, she's claiming that Islam spread through war and violence and so on and so forth. Although it is true that Islam spread through conquest and war and so on and so forth, this is not what they portray to be Muslims going around slaughtering a bunch of people, forcing people to convert and so on and so forth, like what Christianity actually did throughout different nations. But rather, whenever Islam conquered a place and exercised power over the people there, they allowed people to choose either to become Muslim or to remain whatever they were and continue doing whatever they were doing. Islam did not force people to convert to Islam. So in order to actually have people become Muslim, and in order for Islam to actually spread in terms of the number of people practicing the religion, that was purely in the hands of people who decided to convert or decided to keep their tradition. So if Christians wanted to remain Christian, they were allowed to do so, and there were many Christians and Jews living under the Muslim empire. Secondly, of course, if you have a problem with this, then you need to leave Christianity, because the person you believe is God, Jesus Christ, revealed in the Old Testament to Moses to be a warlord prophet, a warrior prophet, to go to war with other nations. What did they do to the Canaanites living in Palestine before the Jews, the children of Israel, entered? They went to war with them, they conquered them, they subdued them. And you even have some terrible passages. Like 1 Samuel 15:3 commands that the Israelites slaughter every man, woman, child, infant, sheep, cattle, camel, and donkey. All the people. Against the Amalekites, just destroy them all. So if you have a problem with warrior prophets like Moses, and if you have a problem with religions or ideas spreading through any kind of war, then you need to leave Christianity. And for the verse of the Quran that she brought to the table, yes, under any society, under any authority, under any country, you need to pay taxes or you will be humbled or whatever. If you don't pay taxes in your country, you're thrown in prison. So if you don't pay taxes, it's a crime anywhere, including under Muslim authorities. You got to pay taxes. In return for those taxes, receive services from the Muslims. So for example, you're protected. If your country's ever attacked, you are protected. You're provided also with the social services that other people receive. And you don't have to fight for the country. So Muslims, if anything, have it worse because they have to actually go to war and protect the non-Muslims. And if people would rather become Muslim and not pay the tax, that's perfectly fine. But Muslims pay more in our zakat and our obligatory charity every year than non-Muslims pay in the tax. So it doesn't really help that case either if they're just concerned about having to pay a tax. Also, when it says fight those who do not believe in Allah in the last day, this is actually, if anything, a merciful verse, because Allah, in all the context of war, when he says to go attack people or to off certain people, it's always in response wants to people who have started a fight or a war against the Muslims, or those who have broken their peace treaties and conspired against the Muslims. So it's always to fight a war or to counter some kind of act of treason. It's never a general blanket statement for all people who don't believe in Allah or the last day. The reason it says fight those who don't believe in Allah on the last day is because if these people, despite their treachery, despite them trying to attack and even extinguish the Muslims' existence, despite all of that, if they do end up believing Allah on the last day, if they convert to Islam, then you don't fight them, you leave them be. That's why that clause is there. That's why that specification is there. Because if they become Muslim, you don't have to fight them anymore. You don't fight them. You don't have to have them pay the tax or anything. They're now a Muslim. Whereas many other nations and countries, including Christian-run empires of the past and Christian-majority countries right now, you fight them and you surrender, they might not care. They might just off you anyways. And according to your Bible, again, 1 Samuel 15:3 and other verses in the Old Testament, they just offed a bunch of people even if they surrendered. So let me see you leave Christianity for that same reason.
More than that, he was a PDF file, marrying Aisha when she was just 6 years old and consummating the marriage when she was 9.
And of course, we hear the argument that Aisha was 6 when married and then 9 when consummated. This is the same argument Christians always bring to the table, because in reality, they're not actually Christian. They are secular liberals living in the 21st century and backward projecting their morality, their reality, their societal norms and moral beliefs onto societies of the past. But not all societies, not Christian societies, just the society the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, happened to live in. First and foremost, for a majority of human history, and I'm talking about like every point in time in every place before the modern age, people were defined as being an adult once they hit puberty. So you had very, very young men, people we would consider children today, fighting wars. And you'd have very, very young women, people we would consider children today, getting married. It is very likely that any of your great-great-great-great-great-grandparents, or even sooner than them, got married at like 16 or 12 or even 10 in some places. The age of marriage, the minimum age of marriage, age of consent in Delaware was 7 years old just about 150 years ago, and that's in America 150 years ago, let alone Arabia 1400 years ago. And that is again because all of human societies throughout history defined the age of maturity, the age of consent, the age of adulthood as whenever they hit puberty. Again, in the Bible you have another issue, because Numbers 31 verses 17 to 18 says to off all the men and the women who have slept with men, but keep for yourself all the taf, all the young girls. And every time that word is used, it's specifically referring to children. And again, we know that historically children were defined as being prepubescent. So you spare all the women who have not had intercourse with men for yourselves. So that's what God commanded people in the Old Testament. Furthermore, in Deuteronomy 22, God says that if a young girl who is not promised to someone for marriage has been by a man, you know what I mean, I'm not going to say it, then the man has to pay the girl's father 50 shekels and then take the victim, who he just did terrible things to, as his wife. Whereas in the case of Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, in the marriage of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, had the marriage contract done at 6 with the approval of the family, right? Parental consent, the consent of the guardian, and waited 3 years for her to be mature according to the standards of the time and for majority of history, which was puberty. When their mental faculties were tested and used to prove that this person can handle being an adult with an adult life and adult responsibilities, and they hit puberty and they knew beyond any reasonable doubt that harm would not be done to the person getting married, then they were considered marriageable and consummation was allowed. And that was done in the vast majority of civilizations throughout almost all of history, again including Christian societies. And the normal modern age of consent laws were brought to the West because in Victorian era England, white Christian men were taking advantage of girls who just hit puberty at 12 years old and using them for prostitution. That's why these laws were put in place, to stop Christian men from doing this. Now, before we get back to the video, I actually have a quick message. This is not an ad, this is not sponsored, this actually pertains to my channel directly. There are multiple Christian apologetic channels that get funded tens of thousands of dollars by their audiences, by their churches, their ministries, or organizations to directly lie about and insult Islam. This has caused decades of lies to be spread about Islam, and more people to rise up to get a paycheck and to continue spreading these lies. On the contrary, when you look at the number of Muslims who are counteracting this and who are investing resources to pay for high quality videos that get pumped out substantially and consistently to refute these lies and to also refute Christianity as a religion, they are pretty small in number. There are very few people who are doing this. So we need more Muslims to rise and to start refuting Christianity and to respond to these lies and these liars when they lie about our religion. And to contribute to this, I am trying to push out more content to address these lies and to further the truth of Islam. Now, I would never ask for something crazy like $10,000. I actually need a very small amount to afford an editor, thumbnail creator, someone to create shorts, and so on and so forth to keep this channel alive and to keep this channel going. So if you guys want to contribute positively to this mission, and if it's something that you guys align with personally, you can find a link down below for a fundraiser I started to pay for these resources for this channel. And keep in mind, every dollar will go directly to the resources. I'm not taking anything personally. They will go directly into the editors and the thumbnail creators and people who help this channel, not including myself. Every bit of support counts, whether it's donating or liking, commenting, subscribing. So I appreciate your guys' support dearly, and may Allah reward you all. Now let's get back to the video.
He received his revelation from a demon in isolation in a cave, and he was suicidal afterwards. How do you read all of that and still say that Muhammad was the greatest example for humanity?
And this is another argument that Christians love to give, although it has no basis. And again, they would have to leave their own religion if they actually applied this standard of criteria to their own beliefs in their own Bible. Firstly, yes, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, did encounter the angel Gabriel, and the fact that he was scared or didn't know what was going on in the beginning is not proof. To contrary, it's not proof that it was actually a demon or that he was possessed. The hadith never mentions that he thought he saw a demon or something like that, but rather he was scared. And if you think that makes him not a prophet or makes him demon possessed, then you would have to denounce your own Bible and some of its own prophets. For example, the prophet Daniel in Daniel 10 verse 7 to 8, where he says that his face turned pale and he fell on the floor and his body had no more strength. And in Daniel 10:9, he falls fast asleep on the floor with his face on the floor, both because he encountered the angel of God and got terrified. In Luke 1 verse 12, Zechariah was struck with fear. He was terrified after meeting the angel. In Luke 1 verses 29 to 30, Mother Mary, may God's peace and blessings be upon her, was also terrified of the angel coming to visit her, and the angel had to tell her, do not fear. So she was scared. And before Christians say anything that, oh, the angel didn't introduce himself saying, I'm a messenger of God, or saying that I am the angel Gabriel, and he didn't even tell a prophet not to be afraid, he just assaulted him and then left. In the works of Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he has a narration that reports that in this exact incident, the angel Gabriel said, do not fear, I am a messenger from God. And in the works of Al-Tabari, he says, do not fear, I am the angel Gabriel. Now lastly, this whole thing of he tried to throw himself up a mountain and everything, the narrations that include this have a narrator named Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, who the scholars like Ibn Hajar rahimahullah and some others say was the one who included the sayings of him going to the top and trying to throw himself down. This was not said by the original narrator, Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, may God be pleased with her. So this idea that he was suicidal and tried to off himself is not actually in the original hadith, but was an additive and interpretive part added into this narration by one of the narrators. So no, he was not suicidal, and Christians need to stop using this terrible argument.
Muhammad added nothing of value to humanity. In fact, he made things worse. How can you say he was the last prophet when Muhammad had a lower consciousness than Christ? Christ was perfect, he was sinless. Muhammad was not sinless. Christ died for his enemies. Muhammad said to slay your enemies.
Now, this is how I know that this woman is completely uneducated, to the point of complete and utter idiocy. She really said with a straight face that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, added nothing of value to humanity. First and foremost, there's a reason that Michael Hart, who is a historian, when he wrote his book, The 100, in which he actually ranked some of the most influential people throughout history, he was a Christian, but he put the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, at number 1. Why? Because he was an innovative leader, a great leader, who was not just a spiritual leader and a prophet, but was a warrior and the head of state and a husband and father to many. And that's coming from a fellow Christian. Now, let me give you some examples of the great contributions to humanity of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. He's one of the first in history to denounce racism publicly, where he says a white person's not better than a black person's not better than a white person, an Arab's not better than a non-Arab, and a non-Arab is not better than an Arab, except by piety and the content of their character. He lived in a society where women were being inherited as property and stopped that, and then gave women the right to vote for their leaders and the right to work and make money and the right to own property. He put an end to terrible practice of burying newborn girls alive because the people just wanted males in their family because that signifies strength. And he established one of the first and greatest ethical justice systems in existence. So much so that some historians say that his notions of innocent until proven guilty and establishing things with real evidence and testimony and so on and so forth was adopted by some Western nations like England. Do you know where we would be if we didn't have this notion of innocent until proven guilty and having actual real evidence of people whose testimonies actually sound and accepted, that these people are trusted and known in society? We would be living in like the Salem witch trial era all over again, where they would take someone, accuse them of being a witch, and have some fake court hearing and then burn them at the stake. Now, let me ask you something. What is something that Jesus established in this world that benefited humanity? Was he a ruler who established some kind of legal system or ideological system? No, he was just a spiritual leader that told people to inherit the kingdom of heaven by obeying God and being righteous. He was not a judge or a ruler or a leader on this earth in any regard that's not spiritual. He actually didn't even provide a way of life or system of life or an ideology for people to live. That's why they came up with things like natural law theory, where people are allowed to interpret what's moral and immoral and how they should live their life according to whatever they thought was natural and believed to be natural at the time. And even that natural law theory wasn't really established by Jesus, but it was added on by church fathers later on. Oh yeah, he also allowed freedom of religion and freedom of belief in his society. He allowed Jews and Christians to believe and practice without any issues. This is something that the Roman Empire did not do. Even the wrong type of Christian, then they would put you to the sword. He practiced multiple times, with actual examples I can give, mercy and compassion whenever possible. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, beat the armies of Quraysh after they tried to attack the Muslims, he walked back into Mecca as the leader. And the same people who persecuted him, who tried to off him, who boycotted the Muslims, and even potentially caused the death of his own wife through being boycotted, and his tribe suffered immensely because of them, he asked, "What do you think I'm going to do with you today?" And they asked for mercy, and he said, "Go back to whatever you were doing." He said, "I forgive you," and let them move on. And lastly, one of the greatest things that the Prophet Muhammad and Islam brought to the world was the golden age of Islam, which came directly because of passages in the Quran where Allah tells the believers to reflect on the world God created, to reflect on things like the she-camel and how God created it. And this led Muslims to actually ask, well, how did he create it? How do these things work? And they started advancing multiple fields of studies that we would see as secular today, like the studies of philosophy and economics and history, mathematics and algebra, science, and the core fundamentals of the scientific method came from Muslim thinkers in the golden age of Islam. They also advanced astronomy and optics and so many different fields. They advanced themselves so much that the Christian European empires had to enlighten themselves from the works of the Muslims. This is called the Enlightenment period. They enlightened themselves off the works of the Muslims, and the Muslims only did these works and progressed in these fields because of Islam, because the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So when you ask for what the Prophet did to benefit humanity, so much, and we would be regressed ideologically in our justice system and our technology at least 300 years. By 300 years, you'd be using 300-year-old technology right now and living in a far less just society if it weren't for the Prophet Muhammad and if it weren't for Islam. And the worst part is, I actually think that she's doing this for Israel.
Here are 5 reasons why every Christian should support Israel.
So this person, Anita Speaks for Christ, is not actually doing Christian apologetics for Christianity. She is attacking Islam for Israel. Now, if you don't know why, it's because Israel needs Muslims to be demonized and hated. So when they invade Muslim countries and off innocent Palestinians, who majority of which are Muslim, the world just doesn't bat an eye and doesn't care because, I mean, they're evil, demonic people anyways. And maybe she even got this recent $7,000 paycheck that Israel was giving to influencers to push Israeli propaganda and to also hate on Islam. And we know for a fact that Israel pays agents to propagandize for Israel and to propagandize against Muslims. And who knows, maybe one day she'll finally wake up and change her name from Anita Speaks for Christ to Anita Speaks for Israel. But with that being said, I'll see you on the next one. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أخبرونا في التعليقات ما هو الرد الذي أعجبكم أكثر في هذا الفيديو؟ شكرا لمتابعتكم ونلقاكم في كشف جديد لزيف الادعاءات.